President-elect Donald Trump has promised to lower inflation.
Make America affordable again. We're going to make it affordable.
About half of Trump voters said higher prices were the largest factor in their decision. But the president has limited control over inflation.
Anything that affects the economy, how much people want to buy and how much people want to supply, will affect inflation.
Here's a look at some of the inflation-fighting tools a president can use. Think of prices as a scale. On one side is demand, which comes from buyers having increased spending power. On the other side is supply, or how many goods and services are available. Prices tend to go down when there's too much supply. When there's too much demand, prices go up.
Where we are right now, there's not a lot of excess capacity in the economy.
Donald Cohn is an economist who spent 40 years working in the Federal Reserve System.
If you add to demand under this circumstance, that's when inflation is going to rise.
And a lot of factors can play a role in driving inflation up or down.
Interest rates, geopolitical risks, growth risks abroad. Things that make people want to buy more will tend to push up prices and potentially inflation. Things that make people want to produce more efficiently will tend to reduce pressures on prices, bring inflation back down.
Much of this remains outside the president's control. The Federal Reserve, for example, is independent and uses interest rates to encourage or discourage borrowing money, which leads to more or less spending. For the past several years, the Fed has used rate hikes to bring inflation down near its 2% goal.
They make their decisions based on the objectives that Congress has given them, and the president can be unhappy about that, as Donald Trump was in his first term, and as many presidents before Donald Trump have been. But basically, it's up to the Federal Reserve to make the decisions it wants to make.
What's going on in the rest of the world can also affect the balance of supply and demand in the U.S.
Think about the Russian aggression in Ukraine. The immediate effect of that was to raise energy prices tremendously because of the cutoff of Russian oil from global markets.
Still, presidential policy can make a difference. Taxation, trade policy, and federal spending are three key areas where the president can affect inflation. Take federal spending.
Spending more money for defense or because people need it to eat, or Social Security, that's putting money in people's pockets. They'll spend it. That's boosting demand.
One way to balance out the effects of increased federal spending is through higher taxes, because that takes money out of people's pockets. When it comes to trade policy, tariffs directly affect the cost of goods and put pressure on supply.
If you put on tariffs, the imports into the country will be more expensive. That's the whole point.
What happens from there also depends on whether the public thinks prices are going up, or if they trust that Donald Trump's policies will bring them down.
Together we will deliver low taxes, low regulations, low energy costs, low interest rates, low inflation, so that everyone can afford groceries, a car, and a home. Common sense.
As part of his plan to cut government spending, Trump has said he will create the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
We expect certain agencies to be deleted outright.
It's very hard to get Congress to reduce government spending. What do you mean? You want to shut that agricultural research station in my congressional district. You want to shut that Army base in my congressional district. It's one thing for a commission to make a bunch of suggestions. It's entirely another thing for the Congress to do this.
With full control of the Congress, Republicans are expected to extend the tax cuts implemented during Trump's last administration.
Extending the 2017 tax cuts will basically keep the kind of budget deficit that we've had through the Biden years, the 5 to 6% of GDP.
We're going to be reducing taxes. We can do things that nobody else can do.
Adding tax cuts on top of what we've already got is going to increase the deficit and will add to demand in the economy.
On the campaign trail, Trump said he would use tariffs to pay for tax cuts and make the U.S. a manufacturing superpower.
The key to this effort will be a pro-American trade policy that uses tariffs to encourage production here and bring trillions and trillions of dollars back home.
It will bring in some revenue, and that how much depends on how broad the tariffs are, whether there are ways of avoiding paying the tariffs by buying stuff from other countries, or if it's easily available here.
There are also other policies Trump has talked about, like mass deportations, whose effects remain unclear.
I worry about the tariff part of it raising prices. I worry about the immigration part of it reducing the supply of labor. I would worry, depending on how all this adds up, the effects could be more on the price increase side than on the price decrease side.
Even with the White House's inflation-fighting tools, federal spending, taxes, and trade policy, the Fed will likely have the biggest influence.
Right now, I think most people, including people in financial markets, think inflation is headed back to the 2%, no matter what the Trump administration does or what the Harris administration would have done, because the Fed is determined to get it there.